The desert went still in that uneasy way that made a man's instincts crawl. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The cowboy had just swung down from his horse when he heard her one sharp intake of breath, followed by a low, strained voice that carried more fear than pain. "Don't just look, cowboy," she said, teeth clenched. Something bit me between my legs. He turned fast. She was half kneeling near a cluster of rocks. One hand pressed hard against her upper thigh, dark blood seeping through her fingers. Her face was pale beneath the dust, but her eyes were steady, locked on his like she refused to let fear win. He scanned the ground instantly. A faint rattle echoed, then stopped. The snake was already gone, but the damage was done. He crouched beside her, careful, alert, his pulse hammering. The bite marks were close together, high on the inner thigh, too close for comfort, too close for mercy. "A rattler," he said quietly. She nodded once. Felt like fire. Her voice dropped. "And it's spreading." He'd seen men die from this. Strong men. The kind who laughed at danger until it crawled inside their veins. He tore open his saddlebag, hands moving on instinct, but came up short. No anti-venom, no whiskey, barely enough water for one person. The sun was already sinking, bleeding orange across the horizon. Night would bring cold, and venom didn't wait for dawn. "Listen to me," she said, gripping his wrist when he hesitated. "If it reaches my heart, I'm done." His jaw tightened. He knew what she was asking before she said it. Frontier knowledge passed from one hard survivor to another, risky, desperate, sometimes fatal for the man trying to help. "Before it spreads," she whispered, forcing the words out, "do it." For a moment he didn't move. Memories flickered. Another body years ago, another gamble that ended wrong. The taste of failure still burned in his throat. But then he looked at her again. She wasn't begging. She was choosing to fight. He ripped a strip from his shirt and tied it tight above the wound, knotting it with force. The skin around the bite was already swelling, darkening like a bruise blooming too fast. The desert watched in silence as he leaned closer, knowing there was no turning back now. Out here, survival didn't care about comfort or pride, only about action. He tightened the strip of cloth until she hissed through her teeth, then met her eyes to make sure she was still with him. The desert offered no second chances, and he wasn't about to waste the first. His hands were steady now, trained by years of making hard choices with worse odds. Still, the weight of this one pressed heavy on his chest. "This isn't clean," he said more to himself than to her. "And it isn't certain." "Neither is dying," she replied. Her grip loosened, strength already leaking away. Sweat beaded on her brow despite the cooling air, and a faint tremor ran through her leg. The venom was moving. He could see it in the color of her skin, in the way her breath shortened. He worked fast, doing what little frontier medicine allowed, keeping the wound open, forcing out what poison he could, spitting into the dust and wiping his mouth raw with his sleeve. The bitterness clung to him, sharp and metallic, but he ignored it. Time had narrowed to a single point. Keep her alive until the next minute. Then the next. She groaned once, then fell quiet. That scared him more than the sound ever could. He pressed his fingers to her neck, counting the beat there. Too fast, but steady. "Stay with me," he said, voice low but firm. "Don't you drift." Her eyes fluttered open. "You always talk this much," she murmured, trying for a smile that didn't quite make it. "Only when I'm worried." The words surprised him. He hadn't meant to say them. He shifted back, dizzy now, the world tilting slightly as the poison he'd taken in fought his own strength. He rinsed his mouth with the last of the water and poured the rest over the wound, praying it would be enough. Darkness crept in as the sun vanished, leaving the sky bruised purple and blue. He built a small fire, hands slower than before, and dragged her closer to the warmth. Coyotes called somewhere far off, their voices thin and mocking. He kept his rifle close, but his eyes stayed on her chest, rising and falling. Minutes stretched, then hours. Her breathing hitched, then eased. The swelling stopped spreading. It wasn't victory, but it was hope. He sank back against a rock, exhaustion crashing over him. If dawn came, she might live. If it didn't, at least she wouldn't face the dark alone. Out here, choices were paid for in blood and breath, and he had already paid his share. By the time the stars burned sharp above them, the fever took hold. It came in waves, rolling through her body like a storm she couldn't outrun. Her skin was hot beneath his palm, breath uneven, eyes glassy and unfocused. He fed the fire through the night, afraid that if it died, something inside her would go with it. She drifted in and out, words slipping loose when her guard fell. Names he didn't recognize, places spoken with bitterness. When she laughed softly at nothing, then turned her face away as if ashamed of the sound. "They were waiting for me," she murmured, staring past him. "Always waiting. First my father, then his debts, then a man who thought a promise meant a chain." He listened without interrupting. The desert had taught him that confessions given in pain were sacred things. She spoke of running at dawn, of sleeping with a knife under her hand, of learning early that kindness often came with a cost. "I won't be owned," she said suddenly, eyes snapping into focus. Her fingers caught his sleeve with surprising strength. "Not by fear. Not by anyone." "You're not," he answered, steady and certain. "You never were." The fever peaked just before morning. Her body shook, breath ragged, and for a long, terrible moment, he thought he'd lost her. He pressed his forehead to hers, whispering words he hadn't used in years, half prayers, half promises meant for no one but the dark. Then slowly, the shaking eased. When the sun finally crept over the horizon, pale and cautious, her breathing had evened out. The swelling had receded to an angry bruise, no longer crawling upward. He checked her pulse again, hardly daring to believe it. Stronger now, slower. She woke sometime later, eyes clearer, confusion giving way to awareness. She looked around, then at him, as if measuring the distance between who she had been before, the bite and who she was now. "You stayed," she said. He shrugged, uncomfortable with the weight of it. "Didn't seem right to leave." A faint smile touched her lips. Not gratitude, recognition, as if she understood the kind of man he was, without him ever saying it aloud. Outside their small circle of firelight, the desert stretched endless and indifferent. But something had shifted. Survival had carved a line between them, sharp and permanent. Whatever lay ahead, neither of them would walk away unchanged. They set out after midday, when her strength returned enough for her to ride. He walked beside the horse at first, watching the way she held herself, ready to catch her if she swayed. The desert looked different in daylight, less cruel, almost forgiving, though he knew better than to trust it. Survival here was never about kindness. It was about endurance. By the second hour, she waved him off and urged the horse forward on her own. Color had returned to her face, and her eyes were sharp again, studying the land ahead. The wound still ached, but it no longer ruled her body. Each mile they covered felt like a quiet victory. The town appeared near dusk, a scatter of low buildings pressed against the horizon. Smoke curled from chimneys, and the sound of life, voices, hooves, a hammer striking iron, carried faintly on the air. She straightened in the saddle as if the sight alone restored something she thought she'd lost. A doctor confirmed what the desert had nearly denied. She had lived through a bite that took most people. He spoke of luck and strong blood, but the cowboy knew better. Luck helped, sure, but will carried a man or woman the rest of the way. When they stepped back into the street, she paused. The noise of town life felt strange after days of silence. She turned to him then, really looked at him, as if weighing a truth she hadn't spoken yet. "You saved my life," she said. "That doesn't give you claim over me." He met her gaze, unoffended. "Wouldn't want one." That surprised her. A small smile touched her mouth, quick and real. "Good." She swung up into the saddle without help this time. Before riding off, she leaned down slightly. "But it does mean I won't forget you, or what you did when it mattered." He tipped his hat, watching her ride toward the open road beyond the town. Where the land widened and choices multiplied, she didn't look back. He respected her more for that. As the dust settled, he turned away and headed toward the livery, the weight of the last days settling into memory. Some meetings weren't meant to be kept. They were meant to pass through a man's life like a storm, dangerous, brief and clarifying. The desert took its share as it always did, but sometimes it gave something back, and that was enough.